In this video, I'm going to reveal 5 top collectible wines, 3 of which I've just discovered in the past month or so. There may also be a bonus wine at the end, so be sure to stick around for that. We're going to start out strong with a Super Tuscan wine that's the latest project from Ornellaia founder Marchese Lodovico Antinori. In addition to Ornellaia, Lodovico also founded Super Tuscan producer Tenuta di Biserno, and he remains the honorary president of that winery. But this is a very new project that he just started along with his daughter Sophia, who previously worked at Harlan Estates in Napa Valley. Despite the fact that it's located in Tuscany, the inspiration for this winery is actually legendary Bordeaux producer Chateau Cheval Blanc. For many years, Lodovico had been interested in starting a Super Tuscan winery that was centered around Cabernet Franc. And a few years back, he found some abandoned farmland in the northeast portion of Bulgari that extended into some bordering areas as well. It's located above Castagneto Carducci. So he acquired this property and planted around 25 acres of Cabernet Franc, and he started Tenuta del Nicchio. So far, Tenuta del Nicchio is not producing that much wine, and they've only produced 2 vintages. 2020 was the inaugural vintage, and I had the chance to try that at the James Suckling Great World of Wines event a couple weeks ago. I really enjoyed that wine, and I still see some of it in the market selling for around $175 or so. But I also had a chance to try the 2021 vintage, and that one is definitely a very special wine that is a level up. 2021 was a very special vintage for Tenuta del Nicchio, and their wine is called Il Nicchio. This is classified as an IGT wine, and it's a blend that consists of 95% Cabernet Franc and 5% Merlot. They mature this wine for around 16 months in 80% new French oak and 20% oak that has 1 previous use. This wine was extremely impressive even from the first taste. There's a dark fruit profile with flavors and aromas that include blackberry, black cherry, and plum, as well as Mediterranean herbs, cocoa, and violets. There's ample acidity and a long, lingering, complex finish. Typically, I'll only feature wines on this channel that are produced in large enough quantities so that everyone can track them down. This wine, however, they only have around 3,000 bottles of it produced for the 2021 vintage. It might be a little bit difficult to track this one down. It will nevertheless be well worth it, however, as this is a very, very special vintage for this wine. And if you're a collector, it's also very special to have some of the first couple vintages from a top producer in your collection. While they do expect production volumes to increase as vineyard sources come online, this winery will remain a small family-owned project. Unlike the 2020 vintage, I haven't yet seen a lot of pricing information for the 2021 Il Nicchio. Nevertheless, given the limited production, I wanted to spread the word now so they can move quickly as offerings come out. Next up is an extraordinary wine that comes from ancient vines that are more than 100 years old. These ancient vines are planted on an extremely steep vineyard that has clay and limestone soils. Due to the harsh conditions, volumes are extremely low, and they produce only around 5,000 bottles per year. If this wine came from the prestigious Priorat region, it would undoubtedly sell for a lot more than it does. In fact, many people refer to this wine as the La Ermita of Montsant. Of course, La Ermita regularly sells for more than $1,000 per bottle, but the good news is that the 2022 Espectacle de Montsant Tinto, can be had for right around $125 per bottle, and it's an excellent value at that price point. I recently tasted this wine for the first time, and it definitely made a lasting impression. This wine is 100% Garnacha, and it's extremely elegant and well-balanced. 2 of the people in my group blinded it as Reyes. They were that impressed with it. It had impressive purity of fruit and a lot of elegance for a Garnacha. The profile is definitely a little bit different than Reyes, however, as it doesn't have near the spice that Reyes does. It is a little bit more full-bodied, and there's certainly much more minerality to this wine as well. But despite these differences, this was definitely a standout Garnacha, and while it was my first experience with this wine, it definitely will not be my last. This is a wine that's made by the talented team at Clos Mogador, who also farms the vineyard. If you're curious, the name for this wine comes from the fact that once you're standing in the vineyard, there's absolutely stunning views of the Montsant Mountains, the Ebro Valley, and even the Pyrenees Mountains that are more than 125 miles away. While I do my best to feature high-quality collectible wines from producers all over the world, this next wine comes from a benchmark French producer that makes extraordinary wines that I enjoy, but yet I've never featured this producer on my channel before. This is largely due to the fact that I haven't yet been able to visit this winery or even do an in-depth comparison tasting of their wines. Nevertheless, I think it's high time that I discussed Domaine Tempier and some of its outstanding wines on this channel. Domaine Tempier is the benchmark producer in the Bandol appellation, which is located in Provence. And of course, in Bandol, Mourvèdre is king. Domaine Tempier produces a number of Mourvèdre-based wines, and I'm a fan of pretty much all of them, so you really can't go wrong with anything that they produce. I even enjoy their rosé. In my view, the crown jewel of Domaine Tempier's portfolio is the 3 single vineyard wines that they produce. Of this trio, the Cabassaou is my favorite. So the next top collectible wine is the 2021 Domaine Tempier Cabassaou. This impressive wine is 95% Mourvèdre, 4% Syrah, and 1% Cinsault. This wine is aptly named as it comes from a Provençal word that means head or stubborn. This is a reference to the severe Mistral winds that blow through the vineyard and the intensity of the wines that it produces. The vines that produce this wine are farmed organically and average an impressive 50 years. This wine matures in large old oak foudres for 18 to 20 months, depending on the vintage. This wine comes in at 14.5% alcohol, but it's a very well-balanced wine. Nevertheless, this is a very intense wine, and Mourvèdre can have some grippy tannins, so it's definitely important to give it some substantial additional bottle age before you start trying to enjoy it. It also helps to get some vintages like 2021 that are a little bit cooler, and there's a little bit more freshness in wines from those vintages. This wine features a beguiling blend of flavors and aromas that include blackberry, plum, olive, blood orange, violet, and mixed herbs. This is another wine that's produced in relatively low volumes, around 4,000 to 6,000 bottles per year, depending on the vintage. So you may want to try to keep an eye out for back vintages of this wine. The great thing about that is that you also will be able to enjoy the wine much sooner than if you purchase new releases. On release, this wine will sell for around $125 per bottle or so currently. Some of the best vintages in the last 15 years or so include 2010 and 2016. But again, this is an excellent producer that makes consistently high-quality wines, so you can't really go wrong with any of them. If you want to be able to purchase a wine that's extremely unique and extraordinarily complex for as little as $35 to $40 per bottle, then this wine is for you. Despite the fact that this wine is from 2009, it's actually a current release. This wine reminds me a lot of some of the complex Lopez Heredia white wines, such as the Tondonia Blanco. I know that a number of winemakers and students who are interested in learning more about winemaking watch this channel, so it's definitely worth a short discussion of the winemaking process for this very unique wine. The producer started with high-quality fruit that was certified organic, grown at a vineyard planted at 500 meters above sea level, which experienced cooling afternoon breezes and also a substantial diurnal range. So there were cool nighttime temperatures, and as a result, this fruit had impressive freshness and acidity. This fruit underwent fermentation and matured on the lees for an extraordinary 6 years. After that, the producer added 10% whole bunches of a white grape called Malagousia and restarted the fermentation process, which continued for another 3 years. Following re-fermentation, this wine spent another 2 years on the lees, followed by 2 years in the bottle before it was finally released. This is the 2009 Thymiopoulos Blanc de Rosé Cuvee R, and the R stands for re-fermentation. This wine is 90% Pinot Noir and 10% Malagousia. I recently tasted this wine at the winery in Nausa with the owner and winemaker of Thymiopoulos, who's one of the top winemakers not just in Nausa, but in all of Greece. He was justifiably extremely proud of this wine and wanted to make sure that we tasted it from a proper Burgundy glass to accentuate the complex aromatic profile. This wine featured flavors and aromas of peach, strawberry, quince, honeysuckle, and brioche. There was ample acidity and an extremely long, complex finish. This wine comes in at 13.5% alcohol by volume. If I was blinding this wine and I couldn't actually see the color, I would probably think it was a white wine, as it definitely reminded me quite strongly of some of the high-quality oxidative white wines from Rioja. Thymiopoulos exports 90% of his production, so hopefully this is one that you'll be able to track down. If you're interested in wine recommendations, wine collecting strategies, and learning more about wine, please do subscribe to my channel. I've been collecting wine for more than 15 years and also have a level 4 diploma from the WSET. So I have both formal certification as well as substantial practical knowledge from the School of Hard Knocks. Dunn Vineyards is one of the pioneers on Howell Mountain. Randy Dunn started Dunn Vineyards way back in 1979, at the same time that he was the winemaker for Caymus. While Randy is still certainly very much involved with Dunn Vineyards, Randy's son Mike has worked for the winery for many years as well and is now in charge of winemaking. Significantly, the Dunn wines are still very much made in the same classic Napa Valley style as when Randy was in charge of winemaking, but Mike made an important change to the oak barrel maturation program that has resulted in the wines being a little bit more approachable at an earlier age. Dunn actually makes two different wines that I'll be discussing in this video, the first of which is the classic Dunn Howell Mountain Cabernet Sauvignon, and the second of which is the Dunn Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. I'll discuss each of these wines in turn. Last week I had the chance to visit Dunn again, and I sat down for a proper tasting and tried numerous different vintages of the Dunn Howell Mountain Cabernet Sauvignon. As with the last visit, I was greeted by an extremely friendly dog who must have remembered me, as he was definitely even more friendly this year than the last time I visited. The Dunn Howell Mountain Cabernet Sauvignon comes exclusively from Dunn's estate-grown fruit on Howell Mountain. This wine is always 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, and both of the Dunn wines mature for an impressive 32 months in 100% new French oak, and then spend another year in bottle before they're released. The wines also have less than 14% alcohol, typically 13.9% alcohol by volume, and there's various winemaking techniques that are implemented by the Dunns to ensure that this 14% threshold is not exceeded. I've previously recommended the outstanding 2019 Dunn Howell Mountain on this channel. Last week during my visit, I was able to taste that wine again, and it's still a wine that I highly recommend. So if that's not one that you've picked up and added to your collection yet, you definitely want to consider that one as well. 2021 was a fantastic vintage for Napa Valley generally, and the Dunn certainly crushed it in 2021. The 2021 Dunn Howell Mountain features flavors and aromas of blackberry, plum, licorice, menthol, and mixed spice. While this is definitely a powerful wine, the tannins were refined and there's ample acidity and freshness. This is a wine that will certainly cruise in your cellar for decades, but you don't have to wait that long to enjoy it. In fact, I also tasted the 2013 and 2015 vintages of Dunn Howell Mountain when I was there, and both of those vintages were showing well already. The family also advised that they tend to enjoy the Dunn Howell Mountain release between 10 and 15 years after the vintage. So certainly much more approachable at an earlier age than they were historically. And you should be able to get any of these wines that I'm discussing regarding Dunn from the winery directly, or they should be available in retail channels as well. Dunn also makes a second wine called the Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon that sells for around $120 per bottle. This wine is made in much the same way as the Howell Mountain bottling, except that about half the fruit comes from the valley floor and the other half comes from Howell Mountain. As such, this wine is much more approachable and capable of being enjoyed at a younger age than the Howell Mountain bottling. I tried the 2021 vintage of the Dunn Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon last week, and it was already extremely enjoyable. This is a wine that you need not age at all, but it will certainly cruise in your cellar for a decade or more as well. During my last visit to the winery a couple years ago, I tried the 2013 vintage, and it was still showing extremely well with no signs of fading. I know that many of you are also interested in visiting a number of the producers that I visit during my wine travels, so I asked Dunn about whether or not they're open for visitors, and they assured me that they were. So if you're interested in visiting Dunn Vineyards on Howell Mountain, definitely reach out to them and schedule a visit for your next trip to Napa Valley.